Thank you for tuning in to Unmasking Autism with AFO. I am your host, Carley Marissa Dummett. This podcast is presented by the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma and funded by the Oklahoma State Department of Health. For those who don't know, the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma strives to improve the lives of Oklahomans with autism across the lifespan. Before we jump in, I would just like to say that this podcast will discuss autism, suicide, mental health and wellness, among other topics, with autistic individuals and different professionals, with the goal of unmasking stereotypes, increasing awareness, advocating for mental health and wellness, and attempting to shatter the stigmas of these topics through conversation and personal experience. Hi, hello, welcome back to another episode of Unmasking Autism with AFO. I am your host, Carley Marissa Dummett, and I have a very exciting guest with me today. His name is Cory Sutton, and he is the CIT project manager and the law enforcement trainer for the Oklahoma State Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. So yes, hi, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Cory Sutton. I'm retired law enforcement. I spent 25 years working in law enforcement, all of it in the city of Norman, but not necessarily for Norman. Actually started with the OU Police Department in 1996, spent almost 4 years with them, and then got hired by the Norman Police Department, spent 8 years there, and in the very end of '07, the beginning of '08, I decided, don't want to play anymore. I left law enforcement. Okay. Went and got a real job. However, that was when the economy crashed. So I lost that real job, and I called OUPD up, and I've been back with them ever since until February of last year, 22, when I was hired by the Department of Mental Health.
Okay, great. And before we launch into our questions, do you want to share at all, like your connection to autism?
So my connection to autism is a little off the table, kind of. We have twin girls, and my wife she was, when they were born, a member of a twin family group. And my wife is also a speech language pathologist, and she has worked with kids with autism since 1996. And I'll be honest, as a police officer, I didn't know anything about autism, even though she was working with them. And through her twins group, she met a mom that has twins, but another child with autism. And this family has had 3 horrific experiences with law enforcement because the officers had no idea what they were dealing with. And so in my head, I was like, I cannot allow my profession to not know what they're dealing with when it comes to someone with autism. So I started working with my wife. The OU Police Department started sending me all over to conferences, and the class was formed in 2000. This class that I teach now is formed in 2011, and I've been teaching it ever since.
That's awesome. I'm very, very excited to talk to you more in depth about this because, as you know, we at AFO, we have a very large stake in training law enforcement and first responders, so I think it's great. And I will jump into our very first question, which is very long, so I'm reading it right off the screen. According to U.S. research, persons with developmental disabilities, including autism, will have up to 7 times more contact with law enforcement than a member of the general population. The National Institute of Health states that characteristics often associated with autism, such as emotional dysregulation, heightened levels of anxiety, and restrictive and repetitive interests and behaviors, are argued to contribute to an individual's risk of encountering this CJS at some point in their lives. This is why the training that Cory offers to law enforcement officers is so important. So I know you briefly just touched on the creation of it, but will you give us a little bit of background on your training for law enforcement officers, where you're doing the training in the state, and then subparts, how many officers have you trained, who is the training offered to, and do they receive any continuing education credits, all that good stuff.
Okay. The easiest way, and I say sell it, but that's not really what I'm doing, but the way to sell this to agencies is simply this. As a police officer, if I give you a question or a command, what do I expect as a police officer? I expect immediate response. Those of us that know someone with autism know that they're not often capable of giving that immediate response. So if as an officer I don't get that response, I'm likely to then step up. If I step up, they're typically going to step up. And then it becomes a vicious ladder that the top of that ladder no one wants to get to, both the families, the departments, because bad things are at the top. So that's why I created the class and where it came from, is just to try to help officers not climb the ladder. They're going to get on the ladder, and I will stress that during the class. You will get on the ladder, but we hope that you're going to stabilize it, stop the climb. So that's where it's come from. The class that I do now today is very similar, but it's nowhere near the same class that started back in 2011 because things have changed and updated, and my wife and I constantly update this to make sure that everything stays on level. Currently, I can tell you exact numbers. Currently, well, not exact, but fairly close to exact, have about 3,369 officers, give or take. Okay. That's again for the last 12 years. I've done 192 classes that I'm familiar with. I may have missed some in there, obviously. Where it is offered, anywhere in the state. Anywhere in the state. It is designed towards law enforcement because that's what I know. That's what I created it for, but I don't care who comes. Anybody can come to my class because I fully believe that anybody can take something away from it. There's just a lot of, what does autism look like? Because you can't tell me what autism is, and I can't tell you what autism is because it's different for everybody. Yep. But what it can look like, ways to de-escalate if these kiddos are spinning up or whatever, and just how to get through some of these closer contacts so that we can get to a safer resolution, both for the departments and the families and the individuals.
Yes, 100%. So is it free for people who might
Currently, yes, it is free.
Great.
And again, it does not matter what field you're in. I have, years ago, this was several years ago, I was able to get CEUs for counselors, for other divisions, for other professions that need CEUs. I was able to get CEUs for them for taking my class as well. Okay. So it's doable.
Yeah,
and the officers do get credits for the class that the commissioned officers in Oklahoma do get the CLEAT accreditation for the class. It's 8 hours, and they also get 2 hours included. It's not 10 hours total, but it's 8 hours. 2 of those also count for mental health hours. So that's one of the requirements that we are required to get by statute. We have to have 2 hours of mental health a year.
Oh, okay.
So this also accounts for that.
Okay, cool. All right, I did not know that. I don't know too much about law enforcement, but I did not know that. That's pretty cool. Can you share with us a little more in depth about what the curriculum covers? For example, how to handle calls involving potentially suicidal individuals or those having a mental health crisis, and also some examples of why it is, I know you touched on it briefly, but why it is crucial for law enforcement officers to know this.
Like I said, it's an 8-hour day, and we start off in the morning by just discussing how these individuals may come into contact with someone with autism, and that can be anything, obviously, right? There's nothing says this you have a contact with autism. It can be literally anything. And then we just talk a little bit about what some of the autism type characteristics that they may see are, and that's very limited. We actually go through more of it throughout the day. Okay. Talk about what the CDC says about autism, how they classify it, the levels of autism. We get into communication issues where these kids may have communication issues, and how you can kind of get through some of that stuff by using other alternative means or changing how you're questioning things. We show videos as far as both officer involvement videos, some good, some not so good. It is what it is. They happen, and we got to learn from these. I'm not backdoor judging anybody. I'm not quarterbacking them, but we need to learn from these on this did work or this did not work. And that's a main feature that we talk about during the afternoon is there is no one size fits all. I cannot tell you guys, I wish that I could say, okay, do this, it'll work every time with autism. You and I and everybody out there knows someone with autism know that's not even close to possible happening. So it's more of a kind of open their eyes to what they may experience, kind of open their eyes and get it in their head somewhere that if they're dealing with someone that's not responding the way that they think that they should or that they might assume that they would, it might be a developmental disability like autism, and they may have to change their gears in order to come to a different conclusion to that call. It is, like I said, it's CLEAT accredited through CLEAT and has been since 2011 or 12. I think it's 2011. So it's a continuous deal. Every 3 years I have to update the number, and they have no problem with it so far.
Okay.
So I enjoy it. I love teaching the class. I have fun with it. So it's not something that I get in there. It's not the most exciting topic, right? I mean, for law enforcement, it's not guns, drugs, and rock and roll. It's a mental health thing. Yeah. It's an autism thing, and that's not one of their usually main avenues. But I have a lot of officers that'll come up to me afterwards and tell me things like, every officer should have this. They thank me for the information. I do keep evaluations of the class, and I get lots of comments like that from the class as far, everyone should have this, or, wonderful class, good job. I do, quote unquote, have firsthand knowledge. My girls do not have autism. They have a disorder called Phelan-McDermid syndrome, what's that? It's rare. They're missing part of a chromosome. They're missing part of chromosome 22q13.
Okay.
The best way to describe Phelan-McDermid syndrome, it looks like autism.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah.
But it looks just like it. A lot of the same characteristics, a lot of the same factors that go into play with these kiddos with autism and my girls. So I get to share a lot of firsthand experience with them about how, when we're talking about things, look, here's firsthand experience of why this happens or what happens here and how to get through it. So it's kind of interesting on that part. It's very, very, I'm not gonna lie, it's a challenge. I love my girls, but I get to use their experiences to help me teach others.
Yeah, I have never heard of that syndrome before.
It's a rare one. There's roughly, give or take, 3,000 known cases worldwide. I'm willing to bet there's more of it out there. We're just not testing for it.
Okay.
I'm just guessing on that.
Okay.
I think here in Oklahoma, there's 5 cases of it, if I remember right. There's at least several right here in the metro.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So, this is a little off topic.
Sure.
So how were they diagnosed with that? Like, was that one of those?
There was a blood test that they actually had to get. There's the standard way that usually gets caught is a microarray test. I think it's called, is microarray, and my girls passed that.
Okay.
When they went in and actually did a whole exome sequencing and went all the way down, they found this deletion in my girls' their chromosome 22q13.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Which again is probably why it's if it's out there, I just think it's not being tested for it.
Yeah.
You might have to ask specifically for that test in order to get the diagnosis.
And so you say it can look like autism.
Very much so.
Okay.
I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. Like my daughter Alex, these kids with autism oftentimes have a very focused, very specific area of interest or desire or whatever. Mm-hmm. Alex has just two, and it's DVDs or Blu-rays.
Okay.
She does not like streaming services. In fact, she hates streaming services.
Okay.
But she wants to buy every single movie that comes out, and she does. She earns money by going to school, and now she earns money by just doing stuff, helping around the house and stuff. But she has not watched a single one of those movies in the last 3 years. Okay. But she has to own the box. She has to own the case. Then her other major affinity is stuffed animals. Okay. She has more stuffed animals than she has movies. Okay. She knows the name, relationship of every single one of them. That's awesome. I cannot get rid of any of them because she'll know it's missing. Okay. And I'm not okay with that because they're overflowing our house, but there it is. So it's very interesting. Brooke is just very... Brooke is Brooke. That's the best way to describe her. The way that I tell people about Brooke is she doesn't really care what you want. Okay. She might know the answer. In fact, very frequently she knows the answer to whatever it is you're asking about. Whether or not she's going to give you the answer, it's up to her. Okay. I love it. So. No, I love it. And I think that's probably one reason why your training is so important because, like you said, I'm going to butcher the name of... Phelan-McDermid. Phelan-McDermid. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just like what your daughters have, autism can sort of resemble other things like intellectual disabilities or a lot of other disabilities. They kind of do all share similar traits. And so I think that's another reason why the training is so important. And I point that out during the class that we are going to talk about autism because again, that's what I did all my research on because of the family that we have, the family friend of ours that had the incidences with autism, and my wife worked with kiddos with autism. But I make sure to clarify that this is a developmental or a neurodevelopmental disability, or neurodiverse disability. So you may recognize that someone has a neurodevelopmental or a neurodiverse disability, may or may not be autism,
Yeah.
but you're pretty much going to use some of the same quote unquote tactics to get through some of these things. When it comes to, you were mentioning suicide or asking about suicide, the studies that I have and that I use is that these kids are with autism are 3 times more likely to consider to consider suicide than the neurotypical kid. 3 times is pretty significant.
It is.
There's lots of reasons for this that could be out there. I mean, you've got, I asked the class this question. Unfortunately, are these kids isolated? And I asked the question, think back to middle school. I think middle school is one of the worst things we've ever done to children.
Right.
Think back to middle school. If you weren't a part of the group, were you anything? And many times these kids are not a part of the group. In grade school, my girls were invited to all kinds of stuff. They loved going to parties. They did, frequently, at least once a month, if not more, they would be invited to some kind of event or go to something like that. When they got into middle school, that all went away.
You're absolutely
and it doesn't change
right.
much into high school.
No.
It might, but not much.
Yeah.
So they're going to have that isolation. Mm-hmm. Having said that, because these kids are often so, I'll use the word different, are they going to be bullied? Yes, they are. And there's tons of research that says that bullying can lead to suicide. Unfortunately, you also asked about mental health. Unfortunately, these children with autism, 70% of these kids have at least one diagnosable mental health disorder. Yep. Up to half of them have 2 or more diagnosable mental health disorders. The 3 main ones, and I can understand the first 2. I can understand this depression, and I can understand anxiety, especially with autism. They're a very anxious population. The third one, though, I don't know why, how, or this one becomes into play, but schizophrenia is really high with these kids. No idea why that is, but it is really high. And those can unfortunately lead to suicidal ideations. When these kids get, they have a hard time sharing their emotions or letting someone know that they're having trouble. And because of that, they don't freely or willingly or openly go talk to someone. For us, we know that if I'm not feeling good, I can go talk to somebody and hopefully they'll make me feel better. These kids with autism may not recognize that concept, and because of that, it just continues to build. And then if they do get suicide into their head and into their ideas and they get that perseveration of thought, if you continuously think about something, how long before you try it? Therein lies some of the problem. And it's just tough. It
really is. It's also the second leading cause of death for autistic people across the board.
And yes, so I quote I had a American study and a Swedish study, and the American study says these kids on average are going to live to be a half of the normal life of an American, 36 years as opposed to the mean of 72. The Swedish study gets a little better. It's 39 as opposed to their mean of 70, so it's a little bit better there, okay? And then I will ask the class specifically, I'll say, because of that, just having that said right there, those 2 studies, does that mean that autism is a deadly disorder? The answer is no, because autism doesn't frequently kill these children. Yeah. It might lead to their death, though. The American study specifically says, this number staggers me, says that these kids are 40 times more likely to suffer a fatal injury from an accident than the neurotypical. 40 times more likely. That's astronomical number. And because of that, a lot of these kids they're dying at a younger age. Yeah. Unfortunately.
So I actually had a fire officer, oh my gosh, a firefighter reach out the other day to ask me about the top 3 causes of death for autistic children. And we were talking about how elopement oftentimes leads to death or accident. And to go off what you just said about the 40%, do you think a lot of that is caused from a child eloping and then getting into...
Quite a bit of it is, yes. Yeah. And eloping does lead to unfortunately, a lot of these deaths. A study that was completed back from 2011 to 2016, so that 5-year period, they had a grand total of 808 wanderings reported during this study. Of those 808 wanderings, 139 resulted in death. Of those 139 deaths, 98 of them were from drowning.
Drowning is number 1 for autistic children, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
And why are they drawn to water? I don't know. I've got theories. I've been backed up by numerous parents that I speak with and work with, so I keep using them. A lot of these kids are drawn to shiny. And what does water always do, no matter the light conditions? Yeah. It always shines, shimmers, reflects, whatever. The problem is that if I'm standing on the edge of the water, where's the shiny? Yeah. Out there somewhere, right? If the water is shallow, no big deal. I can walk out there to it and we're good to go. Most of our ponds, most of our things do that, where it kind of grabs it and eventually it just goes whoop, like that, and by that time, it's too late. These kids with autism are extreme rule followers, right? And they're also very, very, very literal. So I'll ask you this question. Think not related to autism.
I have autism.
I know. Try to think not related to autism.
Okay.
What do we teach children about crossing the street?
Look both ways.
Okay. I want you to play a little imagination game with me there.
Okay.
Because that's the answer I get every time. Okay. And remember what I said, they're very literal. Yeah. Right? Okay. So I want you to play a little imagination game with me. I'm 14 years old. Okay. I have autism. Mm-hmm. I am at a conference in Norman with my mother. Mm-hmm. Okay. During one of the breaks, I'm going to walk out to mom's car to get something. Okay. Based on the rules you just gave me, right? So I leave the building. I walk out on the sidewalk to the edge of the parking lot. I stop at the edge of the parking lot. I look both ways. Then I step into the parking lot to go to mom's car and almost get hit by a car. Did I break the rules that you just gave me?
No.
Why not?
Because I look both ways.
What did we leave out? Look for cars.
Oh my gosh, okay, yes.
Right? But in a parking lot, it's full of cars.
Yeah.
So this literal understanding of everything can both hurt and help, just depending on how you look at it. Yeah. And every class that I do, all the officers say is stop and look both ways. And I do that exact example with them, and they're like, oh. And I'll ask them, I said, did I break the rule? They're like, no, you didn't. I said, why didn't I break the rule? And they're like, well, because you stopped and looked both ways. Yeah. I said, yeah. And what'd you leave out? And they get it then. They understand it. Now, this can also backfire in it's kind of a silly way. Family experienced this not too long ago. Mother and father and Junior, they had taught Junior about the car part. So they go walking and they come up to a crosswalk, and they all stop. They look both ways. Mom and dad start to go. Junior stays firmly planted on the sidewalk. He's not going anywhere. And they turn around and look at him, and he goes, car! Wasn't wrong. There was a car up the street, facing the other direction, parked, but because he had been taught look for cars, he could not step out into the street because he could see a car. Okay. So it's good and it's not so good. It goes both directions. It really is. When you start to think about how these kiddos are processing and understanding, it's more of a challenge than we understand. Our language, especially the English, the American English language, is so incredibly vague. I mean, so vague.
This is the second time today that I have heard that exact sentence. That's funny.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
so
it's true.
An example I give of that is, I am diligently working on a project, and doing something up here, and someone, no autism. I don't have autism. They don't have autism. They come up to me and they ask me a question, and while I'm working, I say to them, hang on a second. What am I, as a neurotypical talking to a neurotypical, what am I telling that person? How long am I telling them to wait? Until I finish. But is that what I said?
No.
I said, hang on a second.
Yeah.
These kiddos with autism, 1,000. They're going to ask you again.
Yeah.
And in my head, I told you to wait until I'm finished, and you ask me again 1 second later, give me a minute. So now I'm upset, and in their head, the clock just started back up. And you have these kiddos, these folks without autism have no idea what they're doing.
Okay, yeah.
It's very challenging, and I get that. Very little understanding of both, directions. Processing times can be much slower with kids with autism. I'm guilty of this with my girls. Again, that autism similarity. Walk in the house, hey guys, take your coats off, put them on the hook by the door. Nothing. They'll wander around with their coats on forever, right? And if I think about it, I go, girls, coats, hook. They're much more likely to take their coats off and put them on the hook because they can't process all those words that I said to them instead of just coats, hook.
Okay.
So there's so much involved in this. 8 hours probably isn't enough, but does at least opens doors. It opens mindsets about what we have to deal with.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And what these kiddos are having happen to them.
Yeah, so. No, 100%. Wow, yeah, no, that's true. I felt like I was gonna get tricked there for a second with the thing because I was like, wait. I also do agree, though, and we've, one thing we talk about on this podcast is suicide awareness and prevention, and I can speak from experience totally. You are absolutely right. Middle school is, for everyone, it seems like, but Lord have mercy, really, like being bullied. You're right. And, repetitive thoughts. Like I know through therapy, I have learned, ways to stop my brain from looping. But sometimes I replace one loop with another one. It's just a better loop than what is looping in my head. And, I want to ask you a question because you're a police officer, and so the mobile crisis units and the initiatives where, like for suicidal calls, right? Sometimes you're getting a professional that's not a police officer going out to the call, right?
That's beginning to become more and more popular.
Yeah.
Not across the board yet, but it is becoming more, I don't want to say popular. It is, Edmond used to have a program. I think they're trying to re-staff theirs. Tulsa PD has got a program like that. Oklahoma City's creating one. So they are coming. So they oftentimes will have an officer paired up with a licensed mental health practitioner that goes to those calls together. Okay. So there is a safety element with law enforcement, and there's also the safety, let's get this person out of crisis with the LMHP.
Yeah. So the law enforcement officers, though, are they getting a lot of suicide prevention and awareness training, or are they having to seek it out through courses such as the one you offer?
A little bit of both. Okay. It depends on what all their, yes, they obviously are going to take the CIT course, and they'll work through that program, that's a week-long training. Okay. And that's all about, de-escalation, what to look for. We talk about signs and symptoms of other mental health disorders. Just because that's what this is all about. From that, there's also a discussion on suicide in there. We have to work through those with those guys. And then typically those officers that are assigned to that unit, whatever you want to call it, they're going to continue to seek out, because they're interested. They're in that unit for a reason. So they're going to be interested and go seek out more trainings in other places.
Okay, cool. All right.
Typically that's how it works. Yeah.
All right, cool. Very cool. I like that. So what tips can you give autistic individuals, their family members, and caregivers on interacting with police officers during a traffic stop or a stop and question scenario, or during an emergency that helps, like you said, de-escalate and keep both parties safe?
It's tough because every kiddo with autism is completely different. Yeah. And not only that, something that we talked about during the class is that, I'm going to give these guys, the officers, a lot of, and not all of them by any stretch of imagination, not all the options, but I'm going to give them a lot of tools to put in their tool bag. Try this, okay? So let's assume that you go out with Billy today and you try A. And A works just great with Billy. And then tomorrow you go out with Sarah and you have to deal with her, and A doesn't work with Sarah at all. Okay. And you're like, oh, well, that worked with Billy, but it didn't work with Sarah. And then for some reason on the very next day, you have to go back out with Billy again, and A does not work with Billy this time. And it did, because we calmed down, we were talking, and you try it again this time, and because he's in a different place, mentally, the looping, or whatever like you described your looping, changing it or whatever, it may not work what you did with him the last time. So officers really, I think, at least in this regard, have to think really quickly on their feet in order to adapt to what they're experiencing, what the officers are experiencing with these people, with these individuals. For individuals with autism, for family members, caretakers, I highly, highly encourage them to go visit their local law enforcement. Go introduce themselves during a non-stressful situation. Okay, yeah. Because that way it's just an open door. Go talk. That way the officers can ask questions. The families, the individuals can ask questions about, well, what would you do if I did this? And you kind of get that out in the open a little bit. The Autism Foundation of Oklahoma has the visor cards and the little billfold cards. Those are great. I'm all for those, as long as the officers who get those know what autism is.
Yeah.
So it is, but goes back to education a little bit on that part, right? But no, they're great to have because, personally, if I walked up to you and you handed me either a billfold card or a visor card, and I would see that autism, I would know exactly where to go or what to do. I'm going to talk slower. I'm going to try to be calmer. If you're sitting down, I'm going to do everything I can to sit down with you. So it's just a matter of we have to deal with every single situation and every single person as it's happening. But yes, definitely, I fully encourage individuals and family members to go visit law enforcement in a non-stressful situation. When they're doing those events like the Touch-A Trucks, go to those. Because these kids, if they're interested, they can put on all the gear, the vest. Because we took our vests out there and let them put their vests on, which are heavy. They can oftentimes climb in the cars, squeak the sirens, get on the PA and talk on the PA,
I know.
which they love it. So.
I got into the big, I forget what it was called, but they use it in the military. Moore has one, that big black.
MRAP.
Yes, that huge car. I got up in there, I was like, this is pretty cool.
You have to climb into that thing, because it's way up there.
But I'm glad you say that, because I don't think that might be something that just most people would think about, like, oh, let me go up to the police station and just say hello.
You don't even need that as an event. You can literally go anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
Cool.
And just walk in, say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I live at this location, this is my child, or even if you have autism and I have autism, and I would just like to introduce myself or my family or whomever to you guys so that you know who we are. Simple as that.
Good.
Now, Moore, Norman, and a couple of the other ones are starting programs, but Moore and Norman have the SED program. Big fan of that, because it is, a voluntary program. You don't have to, no mandate to it. But I'm a huge proponent of that, because if I go out on Billy, never met Billy before, right? And I go out, he's wandering down the road, and his, like you said earlier, about his behaviors are causing people, this is not a quote unquote normal thing for someone to be doing. It's normal for Billy, but not societally normal. So somebody sees that, and go, he's high on drugs, go talk to him. So we get over there, and I start talking to Billy, and I run Billy through my system, if I have the SED system in particular, and they come back and say, oh yes, Billy has autism. This is where he lives. These are his triggers. These are his hooks. Beautiful stuff to have. So the more knowledge that officers can have, typically the better off it's going to be for everybody involved, because they should know at that point where to go and how to steer, to try to help de-escalate, to try to help get these folks to where they need to be, or in a comfortable place. Thank
you for mentioning that the SED program is great. I will put the information for that program in the description of this episode, so if you live somewhere where it is available, you can do that. And that is a perfect lead up to our last question, which is very exciting for all of us. Can you tell us a little bit about the interim study that just happened regarding the voluntary disclosure tool on state IDs or driver's license? And do you think there will be enough support to help us carry this into the next legislative session? And why do you support the law?
I fully support it. And now I will say that just a couple years back, there was a legislator that actually pushed to have a mandate, if you have a disability, to have that. And I actually pushed against that one hard. I've graduated from the Partners in Policy Making program, so I've been on the floor talking. Obviously I was out the other day with the commission. But I don't want to mandate you, if you have a disability, that you must get that on your card.
I agree.
If it's voluntary, we're good to go. Big fan of it, because if I walk up to an individual and they hand me their driver's license or ID card, and I can see on there somewhere that they have, right away I can see it and go, oh, this says he has autism. Again, based on my training and my knowledge, then I can adjust my gears to try to get quicker to this individual's comfortable place. Again, it comes back to knowledge, because if an officer walks up to somebody and they hand them an ID card and it says autism on it, they don't know what autism is, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. Interesting about that hearing that we had is that the training was actually one of the biggest things that came out of that. All the legislators were in there, like, well, it sounds like we need to do more training. So there is that. I fully believe it's a great tool and asset to have added to our ID cards in the state of Oklahoma. I mean, I've trained, 3,000, almost 4,000 officers now. So there's a likelihood that someone's going to know what that means on the call.
Yeah. And even if, like, say, for example, even if the officer hasn't had any specific training, they will know what that symbol means. So even if they don't have the training, if they see the symbol, they'll understand to a point some of the context.
And possibly ask for someone who does know.
Exactly.
Hey, does anybody know anything about autism? This officer across the way says, yep, hang on, I'll be right there. So, and I agree. So again, knowledge is the biggest thing. It really is. But at the same time, and I'm not trying to make it like we need to, but identification is powerful as well.
Yeah.
Please understand, I'm not saying you must.
No, yeah.
If you're willing to, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because that can help both sides of the coin.
100%, because I think, I think everyone's aware of, sometimes cops don't have the best reputation. But, like you said, you gave the stimming example. You're right. Like, societally, somebody walking around stimming, especially if they're really, really stimming, may resemble that of a drug user to a police officer. And I think something that's important for people to understand is the door swings both ways a lot of time. And you guys are trained to notice certain things. You are here to serve and protect. And, if somebody is stimming like that and the officer, is like, oh, that person is high on drugs or something, that's what y'all have been trained to do. And it doesn't mean that cops are bad people or anything like that, but that's why things like this legislation would be great, or the training that you provide, or the training that we provide. Like you said, it really just does come down to knowledge on both parties, everyone, I think. You can never learn too much, right?
I'm a believer of that, yes.
Yeah,
you never stop learning.
No, 100%, no. Well, I think this was a great conversation. Is there anything else you would like to let anyone know before we wrap it up, or?
No, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed teaching the class. I have a lot of fun with it. Basically, it is currently a free class. All I need is a date, a location, and people to talk to. That's it.
Okay,
it's that easy. So.
Do you have a website or something?
I don't, but I can give you you can use my email.
Great.
You put that on there.
Great.
Yes, absolutely.
If you are in Oklahoma and interested in this training, the email for it to reach out to Cory will also be in the description of this episode. But besides that, I thank you so much for your time and coming out, and thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning in to Unmasking Autism with AFO. I'm your host, Carley Marissa Dummett. Thank you again to the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And for any information on our trainings or our events, please visit www.autismfoundationok.org or follow us on social media platforms at Autism Foundation OK. As always, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.